See, two idiot NRIs from Canada.
We'll keep that one.
Like
the
kind of notice.
No, not that.
Thanks everyone. Like, subscribe, what do people say? Comment.
And we're back. -1 glass.
Which I broke by accident.
We're fine. What are we reacting to now?
So, two idiot NRIs. We're reacting to some snippets of Jaishankar when he went on the Munich Security Council or conference in 2025, so a bit earlier. And the video is by Young Indian Minds, but yeah, it's a few questions that they had for Jaishankar and his response. The entire this panel discussion is, I think, like an hour or something, so we're just watching Jaishankar's portions.
Yep.
Go to Jay now. There's one of my favorite stories about Mahatma Gandhi was when he traveled to Britain and somebody asked him, "What do you think about Western civilization?" And he said, "I think it would be a good idea."
We're still waiting.
Yeah. So let me paraphrase that slightly. As we're having this discussion, this tortured discussion, what do you think about Western democracy?
Well, look, before I do that, because I think I appear to be an optimist in what is a relatively pessimistic panel, if not room. So I'll begin by sticking up my finger, and don't take it badly, it's the index finger. The mark you see on my nail is a mark of a person who's just voted. We just had an election in my state, just over. Last year, we had a national election. In Indian elections, roughly 2/3 of eligible voters vote. At the national election, electorate of about 900 million, about 700 million voted. We count the votes in a single day. Nobody disputes the result after it's announced. And if you look, and by the way, from the time we started voting in the modern era, 20% people more vote today than they did decades ago. So the first message that somehow democracy is in trouble globally, worldwide, I'm sorry, I have to differ with it. I mean, right now, we are living well, we are voting well, we are optimistic about the direction of our democracy, and for us, democracy is actually delivered. Senator, you said that, democracy doesn't put food on your table. Actually, in my part of the world, it does. Because it actually, today, because we are a democratic society, we give nutrition support, food support to 800 million people. And for whom that is a matter, of how healthy they are and how full their stomachs are. So the point I want to make is, look, different parts of the world are going through different conversations. Please do not assume that this is some kind of universal phenomenon. It is not. There are parts where it is working well. Maybe there are parts where it's not. And the parts which are not, I think people need to have an honest conversation about why it's not. I would argue that as to an extent as someone dispassionately viewing it, which was your question, there are some problems. A lot of it is an accumulated problem of the model of globalization that we've followed for the last 25, 30 years. I think a lot of chickens have come home to roost. Yes, there are issues, but from our perspective today, for us, democracy is delivered. We have a visibly less elitist society. We have one where the public has faith in the political process, where actually every election, in a way, has been a kind of a verdict on the quality of governance. That I told you we just voted in one. My party won that election. We were in the opposition earlier. We had a national election. My party won that election too, and we were incumbents. And we feel, if the Prime Minister Modi got elected for the third time, the ruling party got elected, and to a large extent it is because of the delivery through democratic systems. So it is healthy, it is well, maybe not all over the world, but let's not make that universal.
No, I think that's a good point. And in fact, I was going to ask you a follow-up question here before I'm going to open it up to the floor, so do get your questions ready. Because we in the West, for lack of a better term, in Europe and the United States, I think we tend to sort of preoccupy ourselves with ourselves a lot, especially these days. And I think, all the middle powers that are, increasingly important, especially in our foreign policy, in the various conflicts that we're involved in, for better or for worse, I think they have their own views of what systems work and what don't. We used to assume in the West that our system is the one that everybody wants to adopt over time. So I guess the question to you, India, of course, being the largest democracy in the world, is your sense among your counterparts in, again, for lack of a better term, the global South, that democracy is still a system people aspire to, countries aspire to, or are there now powerful alternatives, such as the Chinese model, which may be more attractive to people?
Well, look, to an extent, all big countries are unique to an extent, but we would certainly hope, to the extent we think of democracy as a universal aspiration, ideally a reality, but at least an aspiration. It is in large part because India chose a democratic model after independence. And it chose a democratic model because we had fundamentally a consultative, pluralistic society. Now, there was a time, and I have to say this in all honesty, where West treated democracy as a Western characteristic and was busy encouraging non-democratic forces in the global South. It still does. In many cases, I can point to some very recent ones, where actually everything that you say you value at home, you don't practice abroad. So I do think the rest of the global South will view, the successes and the shortcomings and the responses of other countries. They will also ask themselves which ones of them they relate to. I would argue that in many ways, India, because it's historically been an open society, one very much linked with the world, many countries of the global South are more likely to say the Indian experience is more transposable to their societies than perhaps those of others. So I do think in our progress as a democracy, the fact that, for all the challenges that we've had, even at a low income, we have stayed true to the democratic model, which is almost, if you look at our part of the world, we're pretty much the only country that has done that. So I think it's something the West should look at. Because if you do want democracy eventually to prevail, it's important the West also embraces successful models outside the West. Two quick comments here. One, look, I would challenge the equation of, liberalism in a kind of an international way with democracy. I do think different societies have their own cultures, their own values, their own ways of doing things. And the idea that there is some kind of one truth and one judgment and one norm, and that should be preached, propagated, evaluated, and judged. I think that is one of the big issues we're having today in politics. And it is done by think tanks, it's done by people who do ratings, it is done by newspapers. So I think there is a reaction in many parts of the world to self-appointed custodians, people who've never fought an election, who are nothing to do with democracy, actually telling the rest of the world what is right and what is wrong in democracy. And I think it is, to me, inevitable that it will be challenged. My second issue, is, look, every country has its mainstream politics. It has its outliers, okay? If I were to look, for example, at how much Europeans, Westerners, reach out to outliers in those societies. If I were to look at what do Western ambassadors do in India, if my ambassadors did a fraction of that, you would all be up in arms. So I think there are double standards here.
I think it's interesting, and I think, to your point, of course, within a parliamentary system, every party is fully in its right to refuse to cooperate with another party. The problem is that some of these formerly outlier parties are now the second biggest parties in our democracies, and their voters, perhaps rightly, resent the fact that they're being ostracized from government. And in this country, in Germany, and I'm German, I can say this, it goes so far as to cause a scandal when you're trying to pass a bill and you pass that bill with votes from that party. So it goes into a sphere that is very hard to explain to voters, right? Swear.
Yes. I think I can tell you in India, we've been dealing with external interference for a long time. I'd be happy to give you a tutorial on how to deal with it.
I like that. Thank you very much, and thank you to this.
Okay, you can just go.
Yeah, so I think obviously that wasn't the entire thing. Those were just, some of questions to Jaishankar and then his responses, which, as always, on point.
Yeah. Yeah,
so nice slap to,
Yeah.
to us.
Yeah, exactly.
He always shows like the hypocrisy of, the West.
And I think India has long had a law that wherever there's a voter, there has to be a voting booth, like 4 kilometers or something. We can look it up and put it somewhere from them. So like these people putting up the voting booths are going into jungles, mountains,
Right.
like anywhere where there's any voting population,
There has
they
to
have
be.
to put a voting booth.
Yeah, for sure.
So like, yeah, India's democracy is just on a
Different level.
mind-blowing scale. And 700 million people voted. So like, multiply the entire population of large countries like the United States.
Right.
So that much buy-in.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah,
So like 700 million, like what's that?
that's 2 United States and a lot of Canada. So like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Actually, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
And then to call that, so like some people have criticized India's democracy, but like it's like a crazy scale of democracy.
Right.
Like, it's definitely very democratic to have like that much of your population voting.
I think Jaishankar said like 65 to 75%. Well, I guess so 900 eligible voters and 900 million, and then 700 million of those vote. So that's a huge number that turn out to vote in general elections and even in like state elections. And the electorate of India is very smart because sometimes like general elections and state elections happen at the same time and they vote someone else in the state election and another party in general election. So they know who they want where, right?
Yeah. It's a very active voting population
Very
that's
active,
bought into the democratic process. Yeah.
And, it's hard for, I think, Western countries to understand because we generally only have like a couple of parties, like 2 major parties or maybe a third one. But in India, there's like so many, right? Like there's so many local parties,
like
there's state
2,500 parties in India
Yeah,
that are
2,500 active parties, which is a huge number. So, the amount of like diversity in India and like the democratic process there, it's very hard to understand for like Western societies.
Yeah, exactly. And I think just for context, I think what she was saying at the end there was about Germany. So their AfD party has been like recently elevated from like a fringe to like people need their votes. So like what's going on there is that the other major parties, like even if they want something passed, they're not like, they're hesitating to work with them because like everything they stand for. So that's kind of what she was getting at.
Right. Yeah.
But, yeah. That's, we're not talking about Germany.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll also just say that, everyone that we know in Canada, the States, UK, like any family or friend friends that we have, everyone loves Jaishankar. Like everyone just is so inspired by him.
I think even people who aren't necessarily for the party, they're just like, a foreign minister like this is like once in a lifetime. We've never had it. No other country has it.
I think he's definitely the best and probably the most popular EAM in the world.
Go on the street and like ask people to name like 3 other foreign ministers.
Exactly. And he said himself, like, it's only under PM Modi that I could, I guess, do as well as I'm doing. But, under PM Modi, he's been able to really transform Indian diplomacy. Think about, and we may react to some of this, but, India not succumbing to the pressure of the West to not buy Russian oil. India has been, but still, being partnering with the States, partnering with Russia, even though we have some disputes with China, we still have a huge trade partnership with them.
So the oil thing was kind of crap anyways.
It was.
Because Europe was buying more Russian gas in one afternoon in the winter than India was buying oil in the entire year.
Right.
So it's not like only one thing goes into the war fund and gas doesn't. It's just it goes into a magic place. It's just Western hypocrisy that this less developed country is doing this.
Right.
We can tell them what to do. And India is just at the point where it's like, no, you can't.
Right. Yeah. And that's the thing. This is a new India, right? This is under this government. No, you can't push us around. We're not a doormat. We understand your hypocrisy and you're not going to pressure us. Right? Yeah. I feel like previous governments might have succumbed to the pressure, but under PM Modi and Jaishankar was fantastic. Yeah. You need someone to articulate your position, right, in the world, and he did that amazingly during the pandemic.
Yeah, and a lot of respect for him as well. Other countries
from all
aren't
around the world.
Yeah, even when other countries get these slaps, they're just like, oh, that's correct.
Yeah,
it's not I haven't seen any ground level hatred of him or a counter narrative or anything like that. It seems like wherever he goes he's well respected, and his points are taken well to heart whenever he makes them.
I've also found that if you look at his videos and the comments under them, it's people from around the world that say, thank you for saying this, you're representing us too. I feel like a lot of people, South. In the global South and other countries, sort of the second tier powers maybe, and the global South, as you said, they feel that, thank God there's someone that's calling out the hypocrisy of the West, the meddling of the West in these other countries.
Yeah. I feel like China doesn't lead like that. It's very China-centric. They're only talking about China itself. Whereas Jaishankar has often been a voice for the global South, and for developing countries and things.
Right.
Like that.
Yeah. I mean, and that is part of the India model, right? India's trying to be an alternative to China in place in Africa and the global South. That was their G20 what's it called motto as well, right? Vasudev Kutumbakam, the world is our family. So I think it's a different model. One thing that the lady said, she said something around I know that the West sometimes thinks that they're the only, we only think about ourselves. I think that's also a narrative that Jaishankar has set. Now, I've heard this a lot now from the West. Remember when he went to Europe, and this was during when US was pressuring India to not buy Russian oil, and all the questions to Jaishankar were always why are you buying Russian oil? And Jaishankar said that, Europe needs to get out of the mindset that Europe's problems are the world's problems, but the world's problems aren't Europe's problems. Yeah, exactly. So now I've heard a lot of Western leaders repeat that. So, I think this is a new India that's rising global power. That's setting narrative as well. We're not just taking it from, other powers. We're actually a global, on our way to become a global leader.
Exactly. I think in terms of like PR, India has now become the third largest country.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. Mm-hmm.
So like the United States obviously has a lot of like export power, like Hollywood and everything.
Right.
And then China has a lot of PR, and then it's India. So
okay.
that's what we're seeing a lot more of now. So like Jaishankar says one thing, and then you start
it just explodes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But he is loved, and like we all feel like he's our hero too, right? Like we're really proud that he's India's external affairs minister.
Yeah.
Then we have to have a good cut. So do you have anything else on the video? I have a couple. Oh, okay. So
just go.
So Jaishankar mentioned this in the video, and I completely agree that democracy, especially in the last 10 years, has delivered, right? And every time, either during the state election or the general election, Indians vote, it's a verdict on, the governance. So BJP, well, first, Modi, our current PM, he was the chief minister of Gujarat, right? And I believe he won 3 consecutive elections there. And the Gujarat model under PM Modi became so popular, right? Because it was so successful, the Gujarat model. He brought so much like FDI and foreign investment into Gujarat, right? And he just became so popular that he was the candidate for PM from the BJP. And then he won the first election in 2014, won again in 2019, and then just won the most recent election in 2024. So 3 consecutive general elections. When you look at the world, there's been a lot of like anti-incumbency, right? Like people are not really voting for like the incumbents. So it's a huge deal that even after 10 years, even though there's probably sentiment of like wanting some change, like he was voted in, after 10 years. Like that's a big thing. And it's a testament to the work that he has done as a leader and his party has done.
In a sense, maybe that like they were the change, and then
they
saw it working. Like India's growing faster than ever,
right?
So there was no need to change it. And then a lot of other places are going through that process where it's like maybe we should change things up.
Right, yeah. And even like, so in the last general election, 2024, BJP didn't get as many seats as they wanted to. And again, part of it is expected because they were already in power for 10 years. So maybe there was some like, like anti-incumbency feeling. But in any case, with their like alliance partners, they won a majority. But since like the 2024 general election, they've like swept every state election that they've, that they've fought thus far. So like, I think for the first time they won Delhi, they won Haryana, Maharashtra, which was a huge deal. I think there was a by-election for UP, which, they, I think, won or like swept. And so like I totally agree with Jaishankar. This is a testament and a verdict on the governance, like the good governance of Modi. And I think like we haven't seen a visionary leader like PM Modi. He is the most popular global leader. Big think tanks and like banks, like I think what was it, Morgan Stanley, World Bank, like all these people say that he's the most transformative leader
and like the highest growth for the next decade at least.
Exactly. And it's only under PM Modi that India's risen from the 11th largest economy. I think before he won his first general election, India was called like a fragile 5 economy. Like we were not in a good state where the Congress left us or like where the Congress left India. And then PM Modi in 10 years took India from a fragile 5 to the 5th largest economy. Beating, soon to be third within the next few years. So, and the fastest growing economy, like you said.
And it's just funny, like, I think they've given up now, but there used to be a narrative that like India's a backsliding democracy or like
Yeah.
Modi's a dictator. Like name a dictatorship where you have a democratic election and then lose seats and become a minority party
Right.
that has to work with other parties.
Right.
Like that's not a dictatorship. That's
Right.
that's a democracy working, and people still again voted them in
Right.
because more people thought this was working than didn't.
Exactly. And you know, we sort of have been looking at this from afar, right? Like we've been seeing like the news and things coming out of India, and it's just mind-boggling the amount of work that's been done in the last 10 years in every sector, right? Infrastructure, defense, you know, education, health, welfare, green technology, economy, everything. Culture, even like culture and sports and things like that. There's been, you know, dozens and dozens of, you know, welfare schemes and initiatives that are targeted at the most vulnerable and marginalized populations. And in the last 10 years, I mean, this is insane. India's pulled, I think, around 250 million people out of multidimensional poverty. 250 million.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
Like-
exactly. So like there's the other thing that people say that this is a far right wing party, and it's not. So like if you took every global party and like put them on the scale, they'd be like center left center.
Right.
Because they're still doing all these programs that help the most vulnerable. They have that social safety net. So like it's just a lot of people here don't
Like the
understand what's
narrative,
going on.
I know,
They
yeah.
just believe whatever, you know, CBC or whoever is saying.
Right, the state-run
with
media,
no
yeah.
real context of what's going on.
Yeah. You know, some of the, I mean, it's honestly, it's so much, like development that's been done in the last several years. You know, like I said, the 240 million people being pulled out of multidimensional poverty, that's a huge number. Like Canada is how many? 35 to 40 million people? 240 million people pulled, right, out of multidimensional poverty.
So like, almost a United States.
Yeah, almost the size of the US.
And like that's another thing a lot of people don't know, because like a lot of people's minds are stuck in like 90s India or like 80s India, and they still think it's that level of poverty,
Right.
but it's gone down so much.
Right. And I think what he said before around, I think during COVID and even now, they provide like food support and nutritional support to 800 million people. That's the size of EU and North America. Like 800 million people. The scale is mind-boggling,
Yeah.
right? Some of the other initiatives that they've done to target, like I said, the most marginalized, the most vulnerable populations in India, that's led to this growth story. So they, and bear with me, so, and the numbers might have even increased because this is the 10 years that they were in power before like the most recent election. So they provided housing, like houses, to 30 million families who otherwise would not be able to afford it. 30 million. So that's like
All of Canada.
all
Yeah.
of Canada. Each family gets a house,
Yeah.
right? And, you know, if you think of, you know, each family in India is probably an average of 5 people, like 4 to 5 people. That's impacting 150 million people that have housing, right? The government insured universal health care. So they are not like far right, far left. They're like pretty center. So they insured universal health care for 550 million beneficiaries. That's again more than the EU and, you know, and Russia,
Yeah.
right, combined. There was the Aadhaar and Jan Dhan initiative that ensured financial inclusion for marginalized, underserved populations. So citizens can benefit from like direct benefit transfers. So before, what used to happen is it wasn't like electronic. So like, you know, things, corruption, like money wouldn't always go to the right person in the full amount. But now it's all electronic, it's all digital.
Yeah, you can't have like 5 greased palms in the way.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just direct payment.
Yeah, so it's direct payment, very easy. People don't have to run around to get benefits. Like if you are eligible for a benefit, you get a direct, transfer of those benefits. And over 400 million bank accounts were opened since the start of this initiative. Again, that's the size of South America. Like these are huge initiatives. It impacts a huge number of people, and so quickly in only 10 years. Like what BJP did in 10 years, it's insane to think about. That is not a very long time. Look at what the Congress did in 60 years.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Yeah, I think
they ruined the country in 60 years.
I think when India gained independence, like India and China were almost even. And today China is 5 times larger.
Look at China,
And now India is just like unleashing its growth.
Right, exactly. Some other, initiatives and things that the BJP has done. Honestly, we could sit here all day because we watch all the news coming out of India and it's just so exciting and we feel so proud, right, to see all of this growth and development in India. So BJP gave $3.7 billion US dollars in entrepreneurship loans in 2023 alone. So 1 year alone, 80% of the beneficiaries were women, right? So these women, they can employ themselves, they can start a business, they can help support their family and then employ others, right?
Is that like the microloans?
Yeah, those types of loans. And then this is just, I think, some of it, but there's been other sorts of loans. They also make it easier now, like online, to get loans from the government. I think we mentioned, under BJP government, India rose from 11th to 5th largest economy, soon to be 3rd. And again, this doesn't just happen. It's not like, if things kept going the way they were going before PM Modi came into power, India would suddenly go from fragile 5 to the 5th largest economy. This takes a tremendous amount of political will, governance.
It might have been fragile 1 under Raga.
Under Rahul Gandhi, yeah. It would have been
number one.
Number one. What else? There's so many things. Digital India, 5G, the UPI.
Yeah, so they're like anywhere on the street. Any vendor will have a phone and UPI that you can just pay them directly.
Yeah.
So there's no way anyone can take part of that.
Exactly.
It's just direct payment. Everyone has it.
Yeah, direct payment. And that
easy.
way, it does so many things, right? It also ensures, once it's digital, then more people can participate in paying taxes. Then the government has, more revenues that they can do more of these initiatives. And, people were, I think Modi, when the French president came to India, he was like, oh yeah, $2 or ₹2 chai, you just pay with UPI. He was showing him. It's so easy to do that, right? So digital India, like we said, digital, direct benefit transfers, digital loans, make in India, right? So transforming India into a global manufacturing hub, making India not so dependent on other countries. Again, this is a huge thing that happened in the last 10 years. Before that, I think the previous governments didn't focus on manufacturing that much, right? No. So we imported a lot from other countries. And then if something happens, you're relying on someone else, right?
So some countries thought that manufacturing wasn't it, and that the next jump was to digital. But a country has to go through the process of getting to places,
right?
So this manufacturing is creating tens of millions of jobs, putting more into the economy, and then you can continue to build on that,
right?
So you can't just be manufacturing is bad or below us. You have to get
and not everyone can be in a certain sector, right? You have to ensure that there's various industries set up so that you're ensuring the maximum number of people can participate in the economy, right? Not everyone is going to, work in the digital, sort of world. They can benefit from things, right? Like if you're a vendor, you can benefit from that, but not everyone's going to be like a computer engineer or like right? What else? So yeah, Make in India, Startup India, like the startup culture in India. We were saying about like ensuring that young people are included in like, you know, and inspired by the science and technology and the innovations that are happening in India. So when there was the successful Gaganyaan launch, right? Like when they landed on the south side of the moon, it was so interesting to see that there's so many like young people involved in that. So they're really trying to involve, you know, like young people in the growth story of India. Khelo India is another initiative. So really investing in sports in India.
Yeah, a lot of people ask like, why doesn't India have more like Olympic gold medalists? And it's because like the investment in it was very low.
Yeah,
and like,
so low.
Like that's not always a bad thing. Like if you have other priorities like poverty and things, you have to take care of that first. But India did. Poverty is so much lower than it was like 10, 20 years ago.
Right.
And now it can start to do that other stuff.
Right.
Invest in sports more.
Yeah. And then I guess one other thing that, you know, you always see in Western media, it's kind of like the fear mongering around like PM Modi and India. They're like, oh, it's a Hindu nationalist country, as if I don't know why being a nationalist is bad. But
only for one country.
But yeah,
like,
only for India. It's okay for.
I mean, there's a bunch of countries that are outright Christian and a bunch of countries that are outright Muslim, but it only seems to come up for India for some reason.
Exactly. Like other countries can be like autocratic dictators, and that's totally fine. But also, even being a Hindu, so-called Hindu nationalist like leader and country, India is the one that ensured that the African Union was included in the G20, right? So where were all these other non-nationalist, you know, Western democracies being more inclusive?
India's like the big power working for the global South.
Yeah,
right? Like,
they're the voice of the global South. And during COVID, India made their own vaccine, vaccinated 1 billion people, like their own people, but also gave free vaccines to countries who otherwise couldn't afford it, while Western, again, so-called non-nationalist, like countries, rich countries, democracies, hoarded vaccines. They didn't give vaccines to like countries, whereas India just gave vaccines for free to like, you know, global South countries, Caribbean, things like that. And they're so thankful.
Pakistan.
But like all these countries are so thankful, right? Like you see
like the US was even withholding like a key ingredient for India making vaccines during that time. And they had to ask a couple of times, like, we're making these vaccines for everyone.
Right. Yeah. So, you know, like just name calling without knowing any of the complexities or the history or what's actually happening in India, it's really not fair, because India doesn't think of itself as just focusing on India. Yes, we need to do that, but it's also trying to be a good voice for the South, like a positive, like, you know, voice for the South. And then I think finally for me, this is also important. It's not just, you know, progress, development, modernizing. It's also ensuring that you keep your culture, your history, all of that with you, right? Like, and I think PM Modi has shown the way to do that. Like he's very proud Sanatani, and I just feel like it's reawakened that because, you know, Sanatan, like Dharm, the culture, it is indigenous to Bharat. You can't separate it, right? And so he's reawakened that pride. I've seen that in the last, 10 years. Like, there was no one talking about these things 10 years ago. And he's made it, okay for, like, us to feel proud about, like, being Sanatani,
Yeah.
And like, why should India apologize? Like,
especially India, like it's gone through so many waves of invasion and things like that.
Yeah.
Like people coming from Turkey and things.
Right.
And like there was always like a bit of shame or like shyness about showing your culture.
Yeah.
And now it's just enabled people to be more proud of it and
Right.
display it more proudly.
And rediscover our history. Like, history was hidden from us, right? Or like, right? Even, I mean, before, by the invaders, right? There were waves of invaders. Like
a lot of temples destroyed, like full libraries burned
libraries
down.
burnt. I mean, waves of genocides by, as you said, like the Turkic like invaders and from all these like countries. But, you know, like now I feel like it's being rediscovered. So first it was hidden by the invaders, and then it was hidden by like after independence Congress and other such parties. And so now it's being rediscovered, like our history.
Like the British rule also for like
and the British
200
rule, yes.
years.
Yeah.
That just like instilled a culture of being a bit ashamed of like who you are. And,
And I mean, all of these fake theories, like the Aryan invasion theory, which has been debunked, like, you know, of course Sanskrit was indigenous to, again, Bharat. You know,
there's a bunch of new like genetic evidence and things coming out about that
overwhelming
theory
evidence.
That it's always been wrong.
Right.
Like of course there's always been people migrating and things like that.
Yeah.
But like it didn't start from that.
Right. And even like how old our culture and religion is, you know, how old our texts are, even that, you know, like thankfully now, I think it takes one strong leader to, you know, to be unapologetic and proud and start investing in these things. And now there's so many people that are now, you know, investigating and doing research and, you know, writing history or like, you know, historical, you know, papers and things like that based on research. And, you know, like and maybe we can react to it. We've seen like videos of people, you know, providing evidence of how old our texts are, like how like thousands and thousands of years old our history is, right? And we were told it was, not, you know, it wasn't that long ago, right? So, yeah,
especially like if you think about like the Indus Valley civilization and things they found then. So like you don't start a fully functional city on the first try.
Yeah.
So that means that civilization had been there trying for hundreds or thousands of years before that.
Right.
They depicted advanced forms of yoga, so that means they had already been practicing it, perfecting it for thousands of years before that.
Yeah. Like apparently there's like either coins or like some inscriptions.
It's like
or
a
something.
signet of Shivji doing an advanced yoga pose. And this is like an advanced pose, so it's like it was already developed
and
when they discovered this.
It's from 5,000 years ago.
Yeah.
So so like, and it's an advanced pose. So like yoga didn't just like fall out of the sky. Like it was developed over time. So imagine how much older like the civilization was.
One of the interesting things in the Indus Valley civilization, there is a particular seal that has survived, a seal that would have been used to stamp an imprint onto cloth or something like that. It's called the Pasupati seal, and it shows a figure which is recognizable as the god Shiva. Well, what you'll see is that underneath it, the way his feet are organized, this is a really difficult yoga position, and the problem with that is that it's an advanced yoga position. It's found in a seal that's 5,000 years old. We have to ask ourselves, how many thousands of years before that was yoga being developed?
Shit.
You know, again, there's a hint of a lost human culture in this. The posture is called Mulabandhasana.
What do we date modern Indian civilization back to?
Yeah, since the discovery of the Indus Valley civilization, you know, we have to accept that civilization in India is at least 5,000 years old. Indian culture is extremely ancient.
Right.
And like then there's like other evidence. Now we're just going on like a tangent, and maybe we'll do like a full video. But like there's other evidence from like astronomical sort of what's it called? Like astronomical
Precession.
precession, but also like observations that are noted in like the Mahabharata and Ramayana, that like Ramayana was like happened like 14,000 years ago, Mahabharata like 7,000 years ago. Like these are ancient.
Yeah, no. So
It's
like
ancient.
And like the British came and said this was wrong, like the stars weren't here. But
Yeah.
like more recently, like I don't know why it took so long to think of this.
Yeah.
But like the Earth moves in the context of the solar system,
Right.
in the context of the local star system, and everything like that. So if you wind back the clock and do like precession analysis, it actually made sense, like where the stars were.
Right.
So they didn't just like describe random nonsense.
Yeah.
They were like very accurate
And it
about
was
where the
very
stars were at the
precise.
time.
Yeah,
Right.
it was very precise because they were very advanced in like astronomy and science and math, right? Like that's where it came from. They were very advanced in that. And so they have like precise description of like the astronomy at certain parts of like the Mahabharata and Ramayana, but they also describe like the geography or like what was happening, like the Saraswati River. And we know now from like more recent evidence about like when it dried up and that like when the Saraswati River was there was there were people living on like you know along the river.
Another thing, the British just came and said this wasn't real.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
like even the text had described that the river had gone underground,
Yeah.
and now there's evidence of a large river that dried up at that period.
Exactly. Yeah.
So like they were describing things that were happening, and like if you're just writing a story, what's the point of describing the star systems at the time?
Right.
Unless you
Yeah.
want someone to be able to be like, oh, like this was actually happening at this time.
But how could you, right?
Yeah.
So like, so the Ramayana, based on those like findings, happened around 14,000 years ago, let's say, right? It was passed down like verbally, like the Indian culture has like an oral culture of passing things down. So it was passed down orally and then eventually written. So it was written much later than it happened. So how could they know that like 14,000 years ago, or like however many, like, you know, years ago, this is the precise like astronomical like observations at that specific time, right? So it like the in the text, it's like a memory based on like what was passed down orally of what the situation was.
Yeah,
So
and the verbal system is made to keep things like exactly as they were. So like pre-writing, like every like intonation, every tone, like how it rhymes, like it was all designed that you keep this history accurately before they decided to write it down.
Right. Yeah. And well, that's why, like, you know, when the British came and like before that, like the Islamic invaders, like they got rid of like the Hindu school systems. They, as you said, burnt temples, libraries, destroyed knowledge, like, you know, and I feel like after 1,000 years of being colonized, right, it's, you know, it's sort of like weakened the, you know, like the confidence. And now finally there's a leader that's like proud of like his culture, his history, and you know that resonates. And we've seen a huge change. Like people are like proud, and why shouldn't they be? And like why shouldn't they acknowledge that there is no Indian culture, history, art, music, anything without Sanatan, because Sanatan is indigenous to the land, right?
Yeah.
Language, like anything, music, like all our classical dance forms are very linked to Sanatan Dharma. They're all describing the gods, right? Like that's what they...
And just the inclusion in democracy.
Democracy started in India, actually, right? Like maybe not like fully functional like we see it today, but like aspects of democracy were in those dynasties, like some of the dynasties that were there. So, I mean, it's ancient, and I'm so glad we're rediscovering, you know, like our ancestors and all of that. So maybe we'll do much more videos about like, you know, like the science and math of that time, and maybe some around like the dating of like the Mahabharata and Ramayana. And I do want to do one on, they just cracked the Indus Code, which wasn't cracked before. So maybe we can do one on that.
So maybe like Graham Hancock as well, like he talked about the signet ring with the Shivji and everything. Yeah. And like the precession of the stars.
Right. Yeah.
And how they were able to date it. Back.
Yeah, because I mean, it doesn't, you know, I feel like there's a narrative that civilization, as like modern civilization, started not that long ago, and it doesn't make sense because humans have been.
It's very Western focused.
It's very Western focused. It was like nothing was happening in the East.
Yeah.
And, you know, it only started when we became civilized.
Yeah, it's like we'll go as far as Greece and then nothing else.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And our brains haven't changed a lot since we like
almost 250,000 years.
Yeah,
right? We've been
so-
the same. So why couldn't civilization pop up and like
And-
go down and vanish
Exactly,
and come back?
yeah.
And yeah.
And like before, I think civilization was probably like it was much more like volatile, and so it might have been, and much more dependent obviously on like the climate and things like that, like you know, and so as rivers dried up, as things happened, as things changed, like it's totally possible that you had advanced civilizations that you know, that just died out and then, you know, had to start again a few times.
Yeah, and again, like the Indus Valley is a huge like problem for like legacy archaeologists, that it's like it doesn't just come from nothing.
Right.
And the two sites are like very distant, but speak a common language. Like the script was the same between them. So that means like between them there was a lot going on.
Right.
Like transport, maybe other cities. And again, these are well-planned cities. And you like civilization doesn't just do that on its first try.
Right.
Like you try a crappy city, it gets better and better. But like these were well laid out. Like yeah, very good cities.
And knowledge takes a while,
Yeah.
right, to like transfer and spread. And like, sorry, the two cities you're talking about are like Harappa and Mohenjo-daro. Yeah. And like, I think the more they sort of like try to find, like the more like cities and things that they'll find on, and towns and things on the riverbanks and things like that, right?
Yeah, and a lot of it's been washed away into the river as well. Like Dwarka and things.
Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes things go backwards. Like, so like the Great Pyramid of Giza was the best pyramid. And then the further on you go in time, the crappier the pyramids get. So like there's now some thinking that like there was a previous civilization that was more advanced that fell apart. And then the Egyptian civilizations that made the rest of the pyramids were like kind of like fallen from that, or like a less advanced civilization.
Yeah. And maybe the knowledge
Like,
didn't fully pass on, right?
And like they were trying to copy it, but
Right.
like why would your fifth attempt be worse than your first attempt?
Yeah,
right? So,
exactly.
yeah.
That's so interesting because it's like the advanced civilization, like that knowledge somehow wasn't passed on, right? Like it could have been destroyed, something could have happened. Like those times were more volatile, more invasions and things like that from other groups, and so you never know, right?
Or like Graham Hancock and the Younger Dryas like meteor impact theory.
Oh, right. Yeah. But yeah, so we'll lots to react to. But
yeah, we should react to that as well.
Yeah, but we hope you enjoyed this reaction. Yeah, that was a great video, and we'll see you next time.
Bye. Like and subscribe.